Hi, Lisa, and thank you very much for joining my podcast. For the listeners, it would be amazing if you could introduce yourself and tell them what you do.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Lisa Michaud, and I'm a success coach and speaker based in Vancouver, Canada. And I specialize in helping women, first of all, have the audacity to go for their big dreams and then figure out the tools and strategies to actually make their dreams a reality.
Cool. I really like also what you wrote me already, where you went a bit more in depth in how in your story and how you actually became a coach. So would you like to share a bit more about how you actually decided to do this or what brought you there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I started down the path that most people around the world kind of go with, like that quote success path. And I went to school and I got a job that had benefits, and I then got promoted in that job, and I got married. We bought a house. Like, we were just checking all the boxes and life was going really good. And then about 5 years ago, I had a health scare, and I faced the reality that I might only have a year or two left to live. And I remember laying in bed with my husband and turning over to him and saying, what do you want to do? What are we going to do if I only have a year or two left? And he looked at me and he just said, well, Lisa, you're the one with a timeline. What do you want to do? And all of a sudden, I just had this epiphany. And the first thing that came to my mind in that moment was move to Vancouver. And I should preface this by saying, I said that I'm from Vancouver now, so you know where this story ends. But at the time, I was living in a small town in northern Canada. We had jobs, we had 2 houses, we had mortgages, everything was steady. And here I was, possibly going to die, and having this dream in my heart of wanting to live in Vancouver. And it was in that moment of realizing that, you know what, this is my now or never moment. I have to decide I'm either going to try and find a way to do this, or I'm going to have to die knowing that I never even tried to go for my dream and go for what I wanted. And so I'm really lucky that it was just a health scare, that I'm healthy today, that it was, I'm okay. But what's really interesting and what stuck with me is this idea that it literally took someone saying, you might die very soon, before I gave myself the permission to say my dreams out loud, and before I had that fire under my butt to actually go get it and make it happen. So after that moment, it was almost like the floodgates opened, and I started, instead of thinking about why I couldn't do things, I started thinking about why I had to do it. Or instead of saying why it's not possible, I had to start asking how it is possible. And so instead of saying, well, it's not possible because Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities in the world, or because my husband doesn't like the city, or we have it's too many cars, or we have jobs, we have mortgages, all these things, I started saying, well, how can we do this? Well, we can do it if we start to sell houses. We can do it if we live in a smaller space. We can do it if I literally, I share a parking stall in a downtown condo building with a quad, like an ATV. Like, all the things, we figured out ways to make it happen. And for me, I realized what a mindset shift that was. So within a couple months after my health scare, we moved to Vancouver. We quit our jobs. We went to Thailand, which we said we were going to do for 8 years and never got around to it. We finally made that happen. And when I settled into life in Vancouver, I started looking for a job, because that's just what you do, right? And I remember looking at these job descriptions, and I realized I'm doing it again. What I really wanted all my life was my adult life, I wanted to start a business. And here I kept telling myself, I'll do it when I have the perfect idea. I'll do it when I have more time. I'll do it when I have more money. I'll do it when my kids are grown up. I didn't have kids, but I was waiting for them to grow up and move out for me to start a business. And so I thought, okay, if this is happening to me, I know it's happening to other women too. And how can I help them? How can I help them, instead of saying, I'm not ready, I don't know enough, I'm not good enough, it will never happen, I can't do it, because how can I help them get out of their own way, have the courage to speak their dreams, and then actually figure out how to make it happen, make it possible. So that's why I'd had a coach before, and I thought this is a really powerful vehicle to make that happen. So I did my coach training and started my business.
Well, that's amazing. And on the other hand, it's like really sad that you actually needed this like huge wake up call to go for what you really want to do. So was there a certain maybe moment or a day where you actually decided, no, I don't get another job, I just start and build my own business?
Yeah, I remember just reading this one description, and it should have been perfect. It was, everything that I would have said that I wanted. And I just had no fire in my soul. I had no desire, interest to actually apply for it. And that I think so often, by the way, we like bypass what we're feeling. We think, oh, I'm just bored, or I'm just don't want to do this, or I'm just lazy. And I paid attention instead and was like, what is this telling me? If I'm not interested in this, that should be perfect. What is it telling me? And that's when I realized, like, okay, now I want to do something different. And it took me from that point a few weeks, a few months, to figure out, okay, what would that look like? I got to talk to my husband about this. It wasn't like, okay, well, business started right now. I had to do the research. I did the training. I really became obsessed with this idea, this question of how, and you're right, it is sad that it took a health scare. For others, it takes that too, or it takes the death of a close family member. Or I hear from a lot of women and men that they lost a job, for example, or had a business disappear, and that was the epiphany. So I do think it takes sometimes these shocking moments, but I don't think it has to. And so I wanted to take what I learned from that sad experience, that challenging experience, and still take those lessons and help women that don't have to go through that. You don't have to lose your job. You don't have to lose your house. You don't have to have a health scare. You don't have to lose someone, a family member, or a close friend, for you to wake up and do this today.
Yeah, I really like that you try to and want to inspire other women now, because I think it's really important that actually women have someone they can talk to and that empowers them, and like you, a role model showing them that it's all possible. When you decided to actually become a coach and started your business, like how did you actually manage all this with like living with this possibility that you might die, and as well still trying to handle your children?
Well, it kind of all happened at like different times. So let me say this too. Don't have it all figured out. I feel like I'm still a work in progress, like everybody else listening. So I don't have all the answers, even for myself. When I just want to really clarify this. So I found out that I was actually healthy before I started my business. So it was such a blessing. I'm okay. I'm healthy. And I started my business before I had kids. I wish I'd waited longer, let's say that. But that's another thing. Life throws you surprises, and we have to learn to roll with them. I would say that definitely in the beginning, starting my business, like I had no idea what I was doing. I was a really good employee. And so that meant that when someone told me to do something, like I would do it. But the problem was that then I was listening to about a million different experts and trying to do all of the things. And so it really took me a long time to actually figure out what were the things that were important in my business. What were the things that were then also important? How do I make sure I make time for them in my life too? Because you can, as an entrepreneur, work all the time and still not have done everything. Even if you look at simply marketing, you could be on YouTube, you could be doing podcasts, you could be doing blogs, you can be doing Pinterest, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and that could take up probably 10 people's full-time jobs if you let it. So I think, funny enough, it took me having my daughter for me to actually, it like forced me to put some work-life balance in place and forced me to figure out what was actually important in my business and my life. Because the amount of time I went from having all the time in the world to having basically no time. And so it made it really quickly obvious what really made the difference and what didn't.
So how do you manage it nowadays with your daughters? So you actually need to take care of your daughter, and of course you want to spend some free time with her, most probably also some time just for yourself. And so how do you like structure your day usually?
Well, I think it's really fitting that we're having this conversation today, because 2 days ago, this answer would have been very different. So 2 days ago, my daughter was in full-time daycare, and she just started about 5 months ago, and I would have had a whole answer for you there. Tuesday afternoon, her daycare provider had a family emergency, and we no longer have childcare for our daughter, and my husband works away. And so, to be really honest with you, I don't know what that's going to look like. And I think this is a really important thing and theme that we miss in time management. We think it's only, or work-life balance. We think it's only about the strategies, or we think it's like, I just need this hack, or I just need this idea. And the reality is that our time and the relationship we have with time is always changing. And what's important is that we are present to that and that we are checking in on that. Because like I said, that answer on Tuesday would have been like what it looks like. If I'd showed you my calendar on Tuesday, it would look very different than what it looks like today. But like my approach and my mindset to it is always the same. And so right now it's really a question of, what do I need? And so like right now, that means I have to clear out my calendar to figure out how the heck I'm going to look after my child. It means that the next couple weeks are going to be me with my child and not me working on my business. It means figuring out like, how can I, with the situation that I have, with the work demands that I have, with the family and personal commitments, and with my own sanity, what does it look like for the next week or month to balance this out and to make it look good? And I think there's so much to be said for like routine and, every day being consistent and those things. And I think that's wonderful if you can do that, but that's just not the way that life always goes. And so I think it's really important to always be adaptable and figure that out. So, my husband and I, here's a couple things that I think no matter what season you're in, if you're struggling with this, that can really help. And number one, it's figuring out what's important to you right now, being really honest about, like how you want to feel. Because if you're already exhausted, adding more stuff to the plate isn't going to help. And that's a sign for you that you need to add more personal time. Some seasons in life we need that. Some seasons we don't. We feel really inspired and we're go, go, go. And that's great. But we first got to check in with ourselves. Second thing, you have to be really honest about what your capacity is. If you are already working 10, 12 hours a day and tired, or if let's say you have 2 side hustles and a main time job, you probably shouldn't add another one on there. Or if you've got young children, especially like newborn babies, or you're a full-time parent, or you've got a demanding career already and you're looking to add something else, like you've got to be honest about your capacity. And I think we see like people like Gary Vee work 16, 20 hours a day. Or we get this idea that we have to do it all before we turn 30 or everything before we turn 40. And that's just not the truth. And I think we so often it's just really important to give ourselves a break and be like, okay, what can I actually do? By the way, all these things that I'm saying, I'm doing right now. I'm in the process of that. Number one, how do I want to feel? Number two, what's my capacity? My capacity from 2 days ago just shot way down. And instead of trying to bypass that, be like, oh, I'm still going to hustle. I'm still going to, it's reality, and that's okay. And this is my situation. And then let's move forward from there. So I think that's super important to think about. And also then from there, identifying what's the best use of my time. What are the things that are the very most important? I may not be able to go for a spa day, or I may not be able to spend hours crafting the perfect pitches for things, or be, doing all the things. But if there was just a couple of things, if I only have, which I only have now, an hour maybe a day or 2 hours a day, what is the most valuable use of my time? Is there like, how can I make sure I'm still moving my body? How can I make sure that I'm serving my existing clients right now? And how can I make sure there's still business development in there, so I'm still growing my business in a meaningful way? So I hope that I know that's like a very long answer, but that's what it is for most of us. It's always changing, it's always evolving, and you're always your own best expert. And you got to understand yourself and where you're at, what you need, what your capacity is, what your goals are, and then you can apply strategies on top of that.
Cool. I really like the answer that you actually need to start by looking at yourself first. And you also mentioned in the form you sent in that you're also like a perfectionist. And I think it's also something that actually takes so much more time in your business if you are a perfectionist compared to if you might not be a perfectionist. So how do you handle being a perfectionist, or do you have any tips for people who are like really perfectionists?
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, here's a little reframe too that I learned a couple years ago from Brendan Burchard. I went to one of his events. And he asked, how many of you guys in the room are perfectionists? And just about everyone put their hand up. And he said, he's like, here's the thing. Most of you are not perfectionists. You're just afraid. because if you were a perfectionist, you would know that the definition of perfectionism means to actually craft something and then perfect upon it. He's like, most of you haven't even put anything out to the world to perfect. You're just like you're just procrastinating on this fear. And so I think, the overachieving, perfectionism, and even procrastination can sometimes all tie together. And I struggle from this very badly if I'm not on top of it. So if you're a perfectionist, know that you're not alone, and also get going to yourself and figure out what is that actually about. In the moments when you find yourself reading and rereading and retweaking and re-recording and re-editing and whatever it is that you're doing, or it's midnight and you have to be somewhere at 6 a.m. and you're still trying to make it just that much better, check in and be like, what am I so afraid of? What is really going on here? And some of us, we may need to talk that out with a friend. I actually keep a journal right beside me when these kinds of moments come up, and I write in my journal. Some people maybe meditate on this, some people know, but often it's like, okay, I'm actually afraid to put this out there. And so I think that the more I put effort I put into this, the more likely that nobody's going to hate it. But the truth is that someone's going to hate something you do at some point. That's just the truth. Your favorite bottle of wine, someone doesn't like that. Your favorite pizza, somebody doesn't like that. Your favorite city to travel, someone else hates it. And so it's just a fact of it. Some of the strategies that I actually do, I think it's really important to understand that, like, what's the perfectionism? Where's that stemming from? And from there, some of the things that I do then to hold myself back. So for example, if I'm afraid of what somebody's going to think, I just remind myself that, like, someone's going to not like it, and that's okay. And that's a part of me stepping out into being a thought leader. That's a part of me serving people, is that people have to love it. And if people love it, people are going to hate it. I set timers for myself too. I get really clear on, like, how long should this take? I often give myself some extra time because I think we often underestimate how long things are going to take. But then I literally set a timer and I say, that's it. Or I say, I'm going to get to 80% of what would be acceptable for me. And then I'm going to let it go. And sometimes I might, depending on what it is, I might then say, okay, I'm going to come back to it in, 2 days or something and spend one more hour just kind of reviewing it to get it to like 90 or 95%. If you're a perfectionist, chances are your 80% is going to be enough for most people, or your 90% will be way better than what other people create. But we have to put the discipline in place to say, here's my 80%. Here, I'm setting the timer. Let's go. I think another strategy there too can be really helpful is getting somebody else to be accountable to. So whether it's a business buddy, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a business partner, a fellow entrepreneur, of saying, like, I promise I'm going to get this article out by the end of the week, or this podcast, I'm going to have 10 episodes ready by the end of the week, or whatever it is that you say you're going to do. But actually having someone else to be accountable to can be really helpful, because often perfectionists, we also care about what other people think. And so we don't want to let somebody else down. So you can actually use some of that perfectionism to your advantage to then actually finish and get things done.
That's a really cool idea, actually, like kind of to trick yourself a bit. I really like that tip and that idea. So in all this like busy life as a mom, and especially now as being a mom and actually needing to take care of your child like kind of the whole day, I think it's amazing that you still have the drive to actually continue running your business, and that you said, well, now I just had to make space in my calendar, and it's like you just like let it go instead of like worrying about, oh my God, what's going to happen if I clear my calendar? Because I guess some other people would have been scared and overwhelmed in that situation. So what tips or what advice or motivation would you have for people in this situation where they are suddenly like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And they feel overwhelmed probably.
Well, okay. So thank you for those words. And I want to say this, that that 2 days ago, I was not where I am now. I had my tears and I had my frustration, and I thought about quitting, and I thought maybe I just shut it down. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe I just stop. So I think number one, letting yourself feel whatever you feel, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration. And by the way, this, my situation is specific to childcare, but this could be a team member quitting. This could be losing a giant client where all of a sudden you have the opposite problem. You have all this time and no money. There's a lot of different things that can come up. And I think feeling the feels is okay. I think it's important to release those emotions. I think it's important to have that time. And then it's important to also not dwell on it and not let that be what defines everything. So for me, this has been a practice, and like I've been working on getting better at this. And entrepreneurship, motherhood, it teaches you resiliency, right? And so every time we go through tough times, it either makes us more miserable. It either makes us more less motivated, more lazy, or we can learn to bounce back faster. And I think I've learned over time intentionally to bounce back faster. So I want to say, anybody listening to this, your goal is not to not feel the punches. Your goal is not to not feel like you've ever had tough times. The goal is to just be able to bounce back quicker and with more resilience than you did before. So if you have emotions, if you are frustrated, if you feel like quitting, that's okay. Just know that your goal still is to bounce back. So don't let those things be wrong, or don't make yourself bypass those things. I think that creates over the long term some resentment. I also use this time as a chance to reassess what's most important. So this was a good moment to say, am I still committed to my business? Am I still what's my commitment to motherhood? What's my commitment to my family? Like, what do we want? In those moments, it's a really good time to just reassess, because things have been blown open. Same thing with my health scare. It was like that moment of like, okay, what's really important here? It's super easy to get stuck in the day and be like, I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. Wow, how is it already February? Like, it's time just flies. We've all said these things, right? And that's why I think at those moments, my hope is that you, and this is something that I teach people, and if you're listening, do this, like reflect more often, reflect every week, check in on how you're doing, because you're the best indication. But if you don't do that, when something changes in your life big, that's going to be your chance to re-reflect and figure out what's going on. When you know you let your emotions go, and then you figure out, okay, what do I really need right now? What's most important? Then you can just figure it out and build it out. Like, that's the easy part, is then figuring out, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure this out? And also trusting in yourself that you figured it out before, you'll figure it out this time. Something that can be helpful is maybe making a list for yourself about all the times that you've come back from hard times, or all the times you learned something you've never known before. Or, let's say somebody gives you an unreasonable deadline. Okay, write down all the times where you came up with something really fast and met a deadline, and like whatever it takes to build up that confidence and that trust in yourself. Because that's ultimately what's going to keep you going. Or if you don't trust yourself, if you don't think you can do it, you're going to quit.
Cool. I really like your tips. And before we get to the last three questions, I like to ask everyone, where could people actually get to know more about you? And you also mentioned in the form you sent me that you have something to give to them. So I think it's like a week planner. So would you like to talk more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of already touched on it, but if there was one tip that I could give, if there was one thing that I could get everyone to do, it'd be to plan your weeks. That's whether you are an entrepreneur, an employee, a stay-at-home parent, whatever it is, plan your week. Sit down, whether it's on a Sunday or a Monday, and figure out, okay, what are my goals this week? What do I want to do? And when you do that, like this, by the way, is like one of the biggest game changers for me. And I'm, for those of you guys that can see, I've actually got my planner here. I use it every single week. And this also keeps me in balance. So I write down my goals, but I also have an entire section around how I'm showing up as an exceptional wife and mother, and a section on how I'm feeling healthy and thriving and feeling like myself. And so I actually identify in this, what are the things I'm going to do for my personal relationships, because those are really important to me. So I write down date night. I write down acknowledge my husband, because I have to write that down or I'll forget to do it. And I write down my exercise or meditation, or if I'm going to take an afternoon off or whatever that is, and I put it like on my to-do list and I schedule it. So that, if you could get in that habit, you don't have to use my weekly planner. You can grab it if you want. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes there, lisamichaud.com/week. You can use my planner if you want, but what's more important is that you get in the habit of looking at your weeks, sitting down, putting some intention behind it, and really planning that week out so that those things that are most important to you, they're not just lip service, that you're actually doing them. You put them on your weekly planner, and then you schedule them in your calendar, and then you, like any other commitment, like a doctor's appointment, like a client meeting, you actually show up and you do it for yourself. So that's the biggest thing I would say that helps with everything from achieving your goals to work-life balance, to being a better partner, if you want to be a better partner, a better friend, to actually exercising or whatever it is that's important to you. If you don't sit down and set the intention and then put the time in your calendar, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's so true. Because, for example, I keep all my time I want to spend actually as a free time, or like you said, like meditation, or even if I do just some yoga for myself, I always put it in my calendar, because I know, just like you said, if I don't put it in and I'm just like, oh yeah, on this day I'm going to do it, you won't do it. You will just do something else. And most of the time, I guess it's work. You will just continue working.
Oh, 100%. This is one of the biggest mistakes and lies we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves we don't have enough time. But the truth is that we have time. It's just the way that we're using it. And so if somebody all of a sudden gave you a free hour, chances are you're going to just spend it working more like you did. Or if you're, someone who is lazy, if you have an extra hour, you're just going to spend more watching Netflix, right? So it doesn't matter whether we have 24 hours a day or 34 hours in a day. The way you spend it is still going to be the same. The only thing that can change it is your intention and being really conscious of it, and then saying, this is my time. This is my time to do my yoga. This is my time to do my meditation. Or this is my time to go out with my girlfriends and go have fun with them. Or this is my date night with my partner. But if you don't put those times aside, they don't happen.
Cool. Thank you very much for the interview, and for the insights. And I will for sure put the weekly planner in the show notes, of course. And now, coming to the last three questions, I would like to start with if there's any book or if any podcast or anything you really like to read about, or like listening to.
Oh my gosh, so many. Okay, so on this kind of topic of like high performance and being entrepreneurs, I think there's a really great book by Brendan Burchard called High Performance Habits. It's really fantastic, and he touches on a lot of different things that I think are really great if you want to have a life that isn't just work. If you want to be really exceptional and a quote a high performer, it's an awesome book. On his podcast, The Brendan Show, season 4, he actually gives the whole book audiobook for free. So if you want to buy the book, great, go do that. And if you want to listen to it for free, his podcast is season 4, and it's really, really fantastic. I really love that. I'm going to shamelessly plug my podcast too, because I talk about these kinds of things because it's so complicated and it's so personal too. So my podcast is called Golden Girls Podcast, and I think it's lots on work-life balance and lots on the real life. Like you're actually the first person that I've told about me losing my childcare, but I'll definitely be talking about it on there too, and speaking about how to bounce back from these things as well. So, if you like more on that, I definitely share there. I think another really great book on time is 168 Hours by Laura Vanderkam. She's a mother now. She just had her 5th child. And she is a very world-renowned writer and author. And I think she's got some really great tools and strategies in there too that can really help people figure out that work-life balance and just learn more about themselves too.
Cool. Thank you for the tips, and especially for the audiobook of Brandon, because I really like his stuff as well. And it's amazing that he just shares his book for free as an audiobook.
He's amazing. Yes. And it's so good. I've listened to the whole thing. I think pretty much every episode twice there of the book. It's so good.
And the second last question, kind of, is there a quote you live by or something that inspires you every day?
One of the things that I do every day is I actually say, what is my message to myself? And I use that as a chance to check in and think about, like, what do I need to hear today? So I think that's every single day. I think it changes. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting older that I'm realizing this, or if I'm changing, but I feel like some days I need to hear things like, make it happen, go get it, girl. Like, you can do this. Like, sometimes I need to hear that rah, rah, rah stuff. And other days I need to hear things that are maybe more gentle, like patience, or, you know, today, go gentle on yourself today, or you're doing a great job already. And so that's actually maybe a radical thing, and maybe different than what you were hoping to hear from that answer. But I do think that what we need to hear every day, what I need to hear every day, certainly changes. And so I actually ask myself, like, what do I need to hear? And write a message to myself, because I feel like that changes day to day, and what inspires me or what motivates me changes. And what's most important is that I show up as my best self, and how to bring her forward or how to activate her depends a little bit on the day. If there's one thing I do have on my desktop, and I do think about this, it's like how I measure my life. And sometimes this does ground me back and remind me that I measure my life on lives impacted, on countries explored, on orgasms, on dance parties, on baby giggles, laughs and smiles, lessons learned, and lives changed. So that's one thing that I do go back to. And you can hear in that there's everything from personal to joy to family to the impact that I'm making in my business. And so that is something that grounds me and brings me back and reminds me of why I'm here and what I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah, I really like the idea of it's different every day, because sometimes you might need some motivation, sometimes it's something else. And so I really like that you actually say it changes from day to day. And I think you are kind of the first person who said this, instead of actually sharing some really nice inspirational quotes. That's really cool.
Mm. Thanks. I'm like, oh, you're either gonna like that or you're not.
Yeah, because it's true. I think you always, it's not like you are in the same mood every day. So something you might feel inspired to, like, if you hear something yesterday or like a few years back, it might not motivate or inspire you or lift you up um, on another day.
Yeah. And, even on the topic of being a perfectionist, it's a different motivational quote or perspective to get started on something than it is if you're a perfectionist and it's day 6 and you're revising this thing for the 500th time. And what you actually need to hear is to let it go. Right. And so I think it is important to check in and be like, what do I need today? Or like, probably like, what do I need every hour? Like, to help me out here. There's always something that's shifting and changing. And I think that's a really a powerful tool. If you can ask yourself, what do I need to hear today? What's my message to myself today?
Cool, thank you. And as a last question, if there would be something you could change in the world or like give to people if you had a magic wand, what would it be?
I would give people belief in themselves. I believe and love for themselves. I think so many challenges come up in the world and in our lives because we're not sure if we can do things, or we worry about what other people are going to think, or we are afraid that we're not good enough. And I see this come down to even like having the confidence to say to my husband, I want tacos, not ramen tonight. Because I'm like, oh, what's he going to think? Or I don't want him to think I'm too bossy. Like, I think so many times we're afraid to speak up for what we really want. We're afraid to fail. And so we don't even say our goals out loud, or we don't ask for help when we really need it. So that frees up time to do what we want in our lives. We don't say no enough. And I think all of these things stem from not believing in ourselves, not believing that we're worthy, and not loving ourselves enough. So, I think that if everybody listening, if you knew that anything was possible for you, that you could do it, that you were worthy, that your opinions matter, that your dreams matter, that they are there for you for a reason, I think we would see so much less overwhelm, so much less burnout, so much less anger, frustration, people pleasing, overachieving, perfectionism, all of these things, I do think, or people just frankly living a boring life that isn't what they really want. They're living, but they're not really alive. I think that would be my biggest wish for everybody. And even for myself, this is still a journey for me. I mean, I think that it's a constant process and uncovering the layers and believing in even myself more and more, and figuring out where else do I have my flaws, and how can I love myself in spite of those, and how can I become a better person, all of me. So I definitely don't have it. It's not all figured out for me, but I know that the more that I do that work, the more that everything becomes easier, and the more that all the challenges in life, I'm able to face them that much easier. And I also have the courage to say, I'm going for it, I'm coming, like, and I hope that can help inspire others to do it too. And I think everybody in their lives has something that if they really believed in themselves, they would then be able to change so many other people's lives too.
Cool. Thank you very much. I like the insights, especially like also all the, a lot of stuff you shared just in the last few minutes after the last question. So thank you very much for being on the show. And to the listeners, if you would like to learn more about Lisa and what she does and how she can help you, make sure to check out the show notes, because I will put her weekly planner and also her link to her website and her podcast in the show notes, of course.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being a part of your podcast. It's been so great to meet you. And thanks for asking such amazing questions. I hope that everybody listening, I hope that you're able to take something away from this and know that you know what's best for you, and you've got a lot of wisdom inside of you. And I hope that these strategies can just help you build that out.